Marianne Osher, and I'm a retirement coach, educator, and speaker. And today we are doing the third of our three-part series about making retirement the best part of your life. In the first video, we talked about why 70% of us face challenges as we adjust to life after retirement. And we recognize that you're not alone. We also talked about the transition process that happens naturally when any big change occurs in your life, but specifically retirement, and how so often during that transition period you feel lost and disillusioned. And the good news is that if you're patient, that bumpy ride does end. It might take 6 months or 6 years, but it will end. In the second video, we talked about the stories of 3 people that as they built a rewarding and fulfilling life in retirement. We talked about Rich, who started out stuck in that transition period and was very depressed, and how he moved through that to having today a vital, exciting, exuberant life. We talked about Bert, who was looking at retirement but was afraid to give it up, and how he moved through designing his life so that today he will tell you he is living the best of both worlds, which is just what he wanted. And then we talked about an example of how someone used volunteering as a give back to create a life that is extremely fulfilling for him. Now, I think the bottom line of that message is you must be open to new ideas. Merrill Lynch and AgeWave released a new study earlier this year in January of 2016 that said this. I'd like to read you the quote. It said, "The years between 3 and 15, that's 3 to 15 years after retiring, are typically the most satisfying because you are still relatively young and have gotten through that sometimes brutal discovery phase, and maybe now you've found a new self." Today we are going to talk about the steps that you can take to move to that wonderful new phase of your life, that time that is the most satisfying. So is it worth the effort? There are 5 steps. Is it worth making the effort to do it? Well, in the first place, if you look at it as an exploration, as an opportunity to get in touch with yourself in a better way, it certainly is rewarding from that perspective. But let's look at what happens if you choose not to make the effort. I have a really good friend whose name is Jack. And Jack chose not to do that. Now, Jack is a big guy. He's 6'6". He went to a very prestigious law school. He retired as general counsel of a significant corporation. And when he moved to Marco Island, Florida, he was living his dream. He had a boat in the backyard of his condo, and he was in nirvana. And that was the honeymoon phase that we've often talked about. And for him, it lasted about 3 years. And then he decided that he really wasn't so happy. So he blamed it first on his wife, and they got divorced. Then he blamed it on the condo, and so he jettisoned the condo and built a nice big house with the boat in the backyard. And that was terrific for a while. But then again, one day Jack said, I'm just not happy. But he wasn't willing to take the 5 steps that I'm going to tell you about today. And the sad part is, what happened to Jake is, as happened to so many people in retirement that don't do this work, he fell into a deeper and deeper depression. And the more depressed he got, the more his health deteriorated, and the more new ailments crept up. Ultimately, Jack sold his boat because he never went out on it anymore. He sold his house and moved totally away, thinking maybe that's going to do it. But the truth of the matter is, what does do it is going through the process that I'm about to tell you about. And when you think about Jack, compare what happened to Jack to what happened to Rich. Now, Rich took the time to work through these exact 5 steps, and he's living a vibrant, fulfilling, exciting life today, just like you can. So the first step is about becoming aware of the new retirement picture. We talked about that a little bit in video 1, but it's really all about seeing that retirement is no longer a dead end. It's no longer you're out to pasture. It's no longer that your only option is to play golf. Today the options are significantly different. And so in that segment in that time together, we look at the myths about retirement, but we also look at what your attitudes are about retirement. Because after all, the mindset that you have when you approach anything determines the outcome of that. If you look at something through a negative lens and negative eyes, you're likely to end up with a negative outcome. However, if you can see the possibility and you can see the excitement and you look at the next phase of your life through that lens, there's a whole different range of possibilities. We also talk about in this first step the fact that there are 6 ways that people approach retirement. And so knowing which of those 6 approaches you either are taking or are likely to take helps you again to become focused on what the possibilities might be for you. In step 2, we talk about who you are without your business card. I told you about my father who said, today this business card opens lots of doors and tomorrow it's going to be worth nothing. And that whole idea of your identity tied to what you do is significant. Deion Sanders, the Pro Football Hall of Famer, said it very well. And again, a quote I'd like to read for you from Deion. Most guys don't understand that playing the game is only what you do. It's not who you are. Players who fall in love with the game get heartbroken because the sport doesn't have a heart or the ability to love you back. Part of what we do as we unpack letting go of what the past was, and letting go does not mean that you forget or dishonor it. What you've done in the past has made you the person that you are today. But it's also time to move on. So we work through that. You need to work through that. And then secondly, it's to, when you work, you receive some non-financial benefits. And there are 4 of them. We talked about that in the first video. It's your identity, it's your structure, it's your sense of worth, it's the social connections. And those emotional holes that are left when you are no longer working have to be filled. But how are you going to do that? And then you have to develop your happiness portfolio. Now, all of you have heard of your financial portfolio, and you've paid a lot of attention to it. That's what's allowing you to retire. But I'll bet nobody told you that there's another portfolio that you need to focus on. It's the portfolio of all the other aspects of your life. And so we talk about that, and we talk about how to develop that portfolio. And one of the issues that's part of that is, where does work fall into it? But we're going to talk a little bit more about the happiness portfolio in just a minute. Now, Merrill Lynch, that did that study that I just mentioned to you, when they looked at the whole issue of your identity when your business card doesn't work anymore, they said that people told them, the overwhelming majority of people told them, that their new identity was tied to their interests and their activities. So choosing interests and activities that are meaningful and rewarding to you is one of the keys to having a great happiness portfolio. So the third step you have to ask yourself is, what will make life matter to you? What is it? What is it that gives you drive and spark? Nancy Schlossberg, who is an expert in transitions in particular, in general, and retirement transition in particular, she said, and I read again her quote, "Retirement challenges your identity, changes your relationships, and leave you feeling rootless if you have no purpose." There are lots of reasons to find a purpose, find a reason to get up in the morning. Research, and a lot of research now, has linked having a sense of purpose to things like being happier, things like being healthier, and living longer. People who have a sense of purpose live longer, healthier lives. So, what is purpose? When I first started looking at that myself in retirement, I thought if I didn't have a purpose like Gandhi or Mother Teresa, that I didn't really have a purpose. It's only those people with those great big ambitions to solve world hunger or to save the rainforest were the only people that had purpose. But I was wrong. Purpose is much more than that. Purpose is the thing that gives you excitement about what you do. It's the thing that makes you want to get up in the morning. It drives the decisions that you make. It's much more than a goal. A goal is sort of a next step along the road. Purpose is the road. So the question is, how do you get in touch with what your purpose is now? And that's part of the process. That's part of the discovery. That's part of the introspection. So we've looked so far at, step one is all about awareness of what the possibilities are, awareness of how you're seeing them. The second step is all about honoring what was and letting go of it and beginning to recognize that you need to look at who you are today and develop that sense. The third phase is getting in touch with your why, what matters to you. And so now we're going to talk about the fourth step. And the fourth step is building your happiness portfolio. And your happiness portfolio has 8 arenas. They're the 8 arenas of your life. I leave financial out because, as I said, this is not your financial portfolio. This is more your psychological, emotional portfolio. So we'll leave that to the financial planners. But there are 8 areas that you need to think actively about how you want them to look. And so I often start by, I would recommend to you that you start by listing those 8 areas and then to rate where you are right now in how you feel about them. How do you feel about your health? How do you feel about your social connections outside of your family? How do you feel about your relationships with the significant people in your life? What do you think about working or not working? Where does volunteering land for you? What about your spiritual and personal development evolution? Where are you right now with that? And then, as you go through that, you answer the questions like, do I want to work or do I not want to work? How am I going to give back in a way that matches what I believe is meaningful to me, so that I believe that the time that I invest doing that benefits not just the people that I'm giving it to, but it benefits me too. It talks about you have to look at those social connections that I mentioned, and by that I mean in retirement, after you have left whatever your work was before, and you lose those connections, forming new connections and investing time in nurturing those connections is even more important than it ever was before in your life. So what are you going to do about that? How are you going to meet new friends? How are you going to branch out? How are you going to feel supported? And then, of course, there is the how much time do you want to dedicate to your leisure life? In your past, before you retired, I'm sure that it was a relatively small percentage of the time that you had to invest. But when you look at your happiness portfolio, it's all about how much time and energy do you want to invest in each one of those areas. And at this time of your life, leisure is probably going to be a much bigger investment. As well it should be. You earned it. You deserve it. But it's thinking through that and then looking at, okay, if I am a 3 on my social connections right now, what do I have to do to move to a 10, so that it's a 10, so I can rate it a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. So the last bit of the happiness portfolio is your relationships, and that's step 5. And I make it a separate step because relationships are just the cornerstone of our lives in every way. And it doesn't matter whether we're single or a couple. But if you're single, we then talk about what it is that you want in your significant relationships. Do you want to have a partner or do you not? How about your interaction with your family? What needs to change, if anything, there to make it what you want it to be? We all know some families you don't want to be close to, and other families you want to be very close to. And if you're a couple, the big issue to deal with here is, what about the 24/7? You didn't spend a lot of time together before, and now all of a sudden you've got all this time together. And where does the me and what I need match with the we and what we need as a couple? And so working through that is an important part of the transition. But the other part of working through the transition as a couple is, what are your expectations? Expectations of each other, expectations of who's going to do what around the house, expectations of how much time you're going to spend together. All of those things I encourage you to examine, and not just assume that you know what your partner needs or wants, because I can guarantee you whatever they needed or wanted before retirement is different today. And if you don't talk about it, if you don't explore that, you often make the wrong assumptions. I can't tell you how many couples ended up talking to me because they said things like, we used to have a great relationship and now all we do is bicker. And what's underneath that? The fact that they were making assumptions about some very fundamental changes that took place in their life. So it sounds like a lot of work. I understand that. And every once in a while somebody will say to me, I'm just not willing to do the work. But if that's how you're feeling now, I encourage you to remember Jack. Do you want the rest of your retirement life to be like Jack, depressed and getting sicker by the day? Or do you want it to be like Rich, where he's gone to a vibrant, fulfilling, exciting life? It's your choice, and you can do it. Now, I promised you at the beginning of this video series that I would offer you some resources. If you look below, if you press that link, you will download an assessment that I created, which will help you to see how your attitudes are right now about retirement. And is there anything about your attitudes that might need to shift as you work through this process so that you can have a wonderful, happy retirement? And the second resource is a 5-week workshop that I'm about to launch. And if you click the button up there, you can learn more about it. Or watch your email, because I will be offering a free webinar in a couple of days that will walk you through what that workshop is and how you might benefit from it. But whether you decide to join me for the workshop or not, please build your happiness portfolio. And you may feel like you've got all the information that you need right now. But remember, it's only information at this point. In order to make the journey that Rich and Bert and many of my other clients have made, you need to invest in the process so that the transformation can happen. Because without that transformation, you can't get to the life that you want. And it's difficult to do that alone. Many of you probably heard of Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. It was written in 1935. And in 1935, he talked about the fact that when 2 or more people discuss a topic, that they come up with something that's better than either one of them were likely to come up with alone. And he called that mastermind. We certainly hear a lot about mastermind today, and it was from Napoleon Hill in 1935. And the concept is still valid. That coming together and talking about things is what will propel you to come up with answers that are the best answers for you. Because this work is hard to do all by yourself. So if you decide not to join the workshop, find somebody that can be a support partner for you, a sounding board, someone that you can talk these questions and issues through, because in that talking, you will come up with a better solution. So thank you for joining me for these 3 videos, and good luck on your journey.